Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.
Nick Tincher, thanks for coming on today for this Choose to Connect session that we're filming for NAEP for their centennial celebration. Before we go too far in, why don't you give us a quick introduction and talk about your role with the University of Wisconsin system?
Certainly. Yeah. Thanks, Dustin, for having me. I'm Nick Tincher. I'm currently the Administrative Transformation Program Director at the University of Wisconsin. I have worked on the Madison campus there for about 19 years. And my role as related to a procurement automation project that we're doing is I'm currently serving as a project sponsor.
Right. So let's keep going with that. So you're in the early stages of a pretty involved procure to pay implementation. Before I got to know you, I as an individual, I'd actually seen some videos of you on road shows and tours and talking about what it was and trying to get people prepared for this to be engaged in at a business level on the project. So talk about that process for people who haven't had a chance to see some of that or know how much energy you guys put into that at the start of the project.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, these projects, we want to approach them as business projects, not so much as technology implementations. And so the typical way that we approach these is doing a fairly lengthy period of what we refer to as pre-planning before we really get into a project. That allows us to line up a bunch of things so that we can look at objectively, what is the problem that we're really trying to solve? The issue is not always that we want the newest technology or more modern technology. In the case of us, we wanted to really dig into business processes, policies, ways that we're working, and really make sure that we're providing a really good procurement environment and a procurement experience for all of our stakeholders across the University of Wisconsin system.
So we're in higher ed and we're talking to primarily a higher ed audience. So how might the higher ed experience have some unique characteristic that you're trying to take into account as you're planning a project like this that might be different than how you might think about this somewhere else?
Yeah, certainly. So, at a Research One institution, the first example that comes to mind is all of the purchasing that needs to happen to run a successful research lab. And in many cases, there are very specific products that need to be procured, some of which you can find on contracts that you already have, and some that you can't. And the ways that you need to navigate the process of procuring the exact right, chemical that you need, for example, or the exact right machine that needs to be used in an experiment is often a fraught process. It's always a choose your own adventure. And so we sort of evaluate that from a project perspective and say, this is something that we can actually include as by way of providing a better purchasing experience for our research labs. So that would be one example I would think about. Right.
And when I was with the state of Texas, I was the representative of the CIO office to the higher institution, the Institution of Higher Education Planning Committee. And so I was regularly talked to about how higher ed is competing on a global scale for students and for teachers and for grants. And so making sure that the way that our systems work is supporting, even if it's a public institution, that institution's ability to compete on a global scale for critical resources is really important. Has that kind of discussion come up for you guys in the process of trying to build out a business case on this?
It's absolutely true. I mean, if we think about our faculty and everything that we ask of our faculty, we're try to be very conscious about the environment that we create for faculty. Just like anybody has a choice where they're employed, faculty have a choice where they want to set up their research projects.
Mhm.
And so they often choose institutions of higher education based upon the services and the kind of experience that is created for them to be able to do their work. Interestingly, I saw a survey a couple of years ago that faculty reported that they spend about 44% of their time on administrative tasks rather than actually conducting the research. This includes things like managing their lab members, managing grants, and securing funding for their research programs, but also thinking about just, the logistics of running their lab. How do we work with facilities to ensure that we have proper locks on the doors? And it also comes up in things like procurement. How can we quickly and easily and efficiently procure the kinds of things that we need to carry out what we're doing in this lab?
So let's come back to, and you used a turn of phrase that I use a lot actually as well, right? Around having these projects be technology project, or having them be business projects with a technology component and not the other way around, right? So like I said, I watch videos of you guys road showing with people and trying to get them involved. So how do you try to keep these, how do you visualize trying to make a project like this keep that business element in the middle of it, and how have you been interacting with the business lines on how to help them understand what automation means? Because sometimes I've found on projects we've worked on, if the team has never been automated, they don't even know what they may receive from it. So there's both a need to translate their business needs into the system, but then also teach them what is even possible. So talk about some of those interactions and how you visualize that being effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we often think about technology sort of being the underwriter of facilitating business processes being executed. So you look to technology to provide a modern user experience, and that's great, but that's not going to make your project successful. What you really need to pay attention to are the end-to-end points of the process. What is being input and what's coming out the other side. And then you can add in the layer of how you think about the technology supporting that activity. But before you get there and thinking about business processes, you've got to be really clear about what you want and have alignment within your institution, within your school or college, within your division, department, et cetera, to know exactly what the expectations are for being input and then output of a business process. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of choose your own adventure, especially within procurement. And there's a lot of different routes that you can take in order to procure a service or a product for your research laboratory or for an institution. And you can't solve all of the choose your own adventure things by technology alone. So really, from a project perspective, you want to think about the different scenarios, the different situations you find yourself in, and find as much commonality and create business processes that are going to effectuate simplification within procurement, provide good guidance and good ways for people to interact with it, and then look to the technology to provide, the self-service component of actually running the business process.
Right. So I know in conversations I've had with you that that again, you use a phrase I use a lot, which is benefit realization. So when I was doing some project, when my team was doing some project work in Ohio, they had a group that called themselves like the Office of Benefit Realization. And one of the things that they tried to emphasize in their projects that I thought was very admirable, and we've tried to then incorporate in some of our projects on the go forward, is what kind of commitments were made in the business case that sold the project in the first place, and how do we remember those through the projects, right? Because we shouldn't use a business case to sell a project and then say, well, that doesn't matter anymore because we're over here. So so the phrase of benefit realization and how it helps us think about keeping some of the commitments that were made early in a conversation present through the relationship, and it's hard, and there's 100 things that you have to do, and you can't just do them on the first day. But I know that's something that's important to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, in higher education, it's absolutely true that money is not the first thing that people think about when it comes to projects. But conversely, when people think about projects, the first kind of go-to is, well, what cost savings can I realize by doing this project? Really, with this kind of thing, that's not the right way to think about it, because if you want something that is ultimately going to benefit your institution or your organization, it's worth the investment. So when you think about a project, sure, you have scope, timeline, schedule, budget, all of those components that you want to remain within the parameters that you set of the project. But realizing cost savings alone doesn't make your project successful. You can certainly slap in a piece of technology and save a lot of money doing it, and cause a lot of undue burden and stress and pain for your stakeholders and the users of your project. So using benefits realization is another mechanism for evaluating how successful your project really is. And so you can get very specific about time from order to delivery of certain products. You want to set a target that in our current state today, if somebody wanted to order this product, it takes 15 days. You can get specific about setting targets within benefits realization to say our target will be 12 days. We want to reduce the time that it takes from order to delivery of 12 days. And you might, find a reason for that being important because it allows projects to move forward, research projects, et cetera. And it also aligns a group of people around why are we doing this project in the first place? People work in a project, and if cost savings is the goal, that thread gets lost along the way because there's a lot of decisions to make. There's a lot of choices that you run into. And so using benefits realization is just a really good framework to provide some accountability, some guardrails, some guidelines, and success criteria for the project that you'll see at the end.
So how do you think about what can be measured, right? So we talk about it's important to acknowledge both output measures and outcome measures, right? So I might say that I use this as an example in a training I did for a state yesterday where we were talking about doing more solution-based RFPs. And I said, if we need to clear a shipping channel so that 18-foot boats can go through it, the output measure is how much dirt are you pulling out of the river. The outcome measure is I need to send a 16-foot boat down this channel. And until I'm done with that, we're not done, right? So there's, sometimes the challenge on trying to find measures and do measures is if you're measuring everything, then people get fatigued on doing it, right? So, and I know that you guys are still in the process of trying to make sure that you've got those things that foot, and it becomes a pretty meticulous process. Like how do you wish or visualize trying to make performance measures actually be meaningful without, measuring so much stuff that you're measuring nothing?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in many of our projects, we think about benefits realization being supporting of an institution's larger set of goals. So that would be sort of a good framing for thinking about what are the things that we really want to measure. Well, if we reduce the time from order to delivery of a specific product, what does that mean for the larger goal of the institution? Is that worthwhile to measure at all? Many people don't care how long a product takes, but some people might. So is that supporting a larger goal of increasing the amount of faculty that come to an institution by showing them that, if you select our institution, we can, our target is to be able to provide products in X period of time to make sure that your lab is quickly running efficiently. So sort of thinking about the landscape of things that you want to measure is certainly important. One element is supporting the larger goals of an institution. Another might be thinking about, just what are the pain points that you're currently facing today. So, we talk about output and outcome. Another kind of thought around that is qualitative versus quantitative. You talk about wanting to provide a better user experience for a purchaser. How exactly do you measure that? Do you use surveys? Do you use other things to make it quantitative? Or do you stick with a qualitative measure that you do surveys once annually or something like that? And if that's the direction that you choose to go, is that worthwhile? And what are you going to do with the measurements that you obtain at the end? So if it's actionable data that you get and you can make different decisions to double down on benefits realization or support larger goals, it might be worth something measuring. If it's not, then you might consider, measuring something else.
So as we come into I have a couple more questions in the session. So let's do let me do my last major question to you of there may be people listening who are just starting that journey or who are planning to do something that is substantially different. So you help start a project and now you're in the middle of it and you're seeing some things that maybe went the way that you thought they were, and then some things where you're like, oh, this didn't go how I thought it was. So from someone who's in the early beginning / approaching the middle, maybe to people who are just starting a planning process or trying to think about how they would go about it, what advice do you have to some of those folks on from your experience on where you're seeing the best opportunities for success in your projects?
I would say that at the outset, be very clear and very specific about what outcomes you are looking for. So, doing something like a technology implementation because the technology is better than our current technology, that might not mean success for you in the end. Even though it sounds good now, you want to really be crisp and clear about what objectives you have. And make some decisions with the project team to decide, is cost saving something that is really important for this project? If it is, how are we going to manage and structure the project such that we always have an eye on cost savings, if that's important? So just defining the parameters of a project up front and spending a lot of time evaluating that. Do something of a quality assurance process on that, run it by another set of eyes. They might suggest something that you hadn't considered sort of in framing your project. The other thing that I would consider is as you move into the project and you identify work that needs to be done, make sure that you are doing something around good estimating of the resources that are required to do that. In higher education, especially, we all try to do too much with too little. We all try to spread ourselves too thin. So when you see an opportunity to get involved in something of a procurement automation project and you say, yeah, I can spend half of my time doing that and half of my time doing my day job, I would encourage you to pause and really consider if that's realistic or not. Because if you split your time exactly in half, you will end up spending double the time that you need to spend doing your job. Because these projects do very often require a lot of very quick decisions to be made. There are things that will surprise you as you go through a project that you'll just want to make sure that there are enough dedicated resources to accomplishing the work that you set out to do at the beginning. So those would be the two major things I would suggest.
And then we didn't even say COVID, right? So
right.
So you started this project at the very early stages of that, I believe, right? And so even if you had those resource commitments and they were real,
Yep.
COVID sucked a lot of oxygen out of the room, right? So how have you dealt with that as a scenario?
Yeah, that has certainly been a challenge. I mean, not only for us, but everywhere. And our procurement professionals have really been sort of out in front, making sure that PPE is available to our campuses at the same time as trying to move forward with this project. One of the things that I would suggest doing as part of that is using your governance structure of your project, using your sponsorship, your executive sponsors, the leadership of your institution to affirm what the priorities are. Make sure that you have good project management processes in place to catalog risks and issues, and make sure that you're discussing those with the leaders of your institution. To say, this is a very demanding time right now, and it's a risk for the following reasons. We need your guidance on how we can navigate this. And that might mean that you say that this project is deprioritized for the next 3 months, and that is an okay outcome. That is absolutely fine. It's just very important to flag risks and issues early on with leadership of your project before you're in trouble, because then it just makes it more difficult to recover.
Well, and then the flip side of that is that COVID has laid bare that we need the procurement function to be automated, right? We're not receiving paper bids anymore, right? Or that anachronism went away. We've changed things. In some cases, we've sent our procurement staff to the kitchen tables, right? So we need them to be able to access systems remote. So while COVID in some ways slowed some of the process, it only amplifies the benefit realization.
That's absolutely true. Yes. And I've seen that with several projects where we identify pain points and things that we need to do, all of which have become exacerbated by COVID-19. You think about paper-based processes, approval forms where you send them by mail or walk them to a different building on your campus. You can't do that now. And so that does require, it places a greater emphasis on doing projects like procurement automation that you set out to do maybe before the pandemic, but it really doubles down on it.
Well, great. Well, Nick, thanks so much for taking time, and you were able to be flexible and help me get something in place that I really do appreciate the flexibility. We also talked about the fact that with NAEP, we're looking to do maybe a longer discussion of this with a couple of other panelists in the late spring. So I definitely want you to come back and participate in that. There's some people I've been talking with about being on that I think it would be a really interesting discussion. And so I invite you in. And then from a session perspective, now in Tuesday time, we're going to be starting a live Q&A session that'll last for about 10 minutes. So I look forward to talking to you, being with you then in the future, and answering any questions that people have on our talk.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for having me, Dustin. This was great.
Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.